So I'm obsessed with the plant. This plant I first encountered while I learned about indigo, this deep blue indigo. So as an artist, I really wanted to use this color in my practice. And through doing research, I learned that the color actually comes from a plant. And because I really, really, really wanted to use it, I was obsessed with finding the plant. And eventually, I ended up in Dakar in Senegal in 2017. And I spent 2 months searching for this plant. But because indigo dyeing using the plant is a dyeing practice, a lot of contemporary makers are using synthetic indigo. I couldn't find anyone who was actually preserving the plant itself. So I ended up asking the people I know to ask the people they know if they knew anyone who was still farming or cultivating this plant. And eventually, through connections, I'm connected to a women's organization in Casamance that recently had done an exhibition in Dakar where they showed indigo-dyed fabrics. So me and a friend of mine would take an 8-hour overnight taxi journey, and we travel by road with our limited French and understanding of Wolof. And the trip ends up being 22 hours. But like I said, I'm obsessed with this plant, so I journeyed on. And eventually we arrive in Casamance. We meet the guide who takes us to the village to meet one of the ladies. We didn't have enough time for the lady to actually take us to the farm, so I can actually see this plant. And she ends up allowing me to smell one of the indigo-dyed fabrics she had created for her grandson. But soon after, we had to leave and take the overnight ferry back to Dakar. And that is a story for another day. But anyway, I'm still searching for this plant. And I decided to come back to Dakar. And I asked the people that I know to ask the people they know. But at the end of that trip in 2017, nothing had transpired. So I came back to Joburg. But this obsession would not let me go. And I applied for the Black Rock Artist Residency. I tell them about my obsession with this plant. I try and make it sound artistic, but actually, they don't know. I'm just looking for this plant. But they were amazing because through their connections, I managed to connect to a woman in Casamance who was still making indigo. So I arrive at her atelier. It's very busy with orders coming in and out as there were upcoming cultural events. So the lady doesn't really have time for me. She's busy dipping her fabrics and attending to her clients. So I spend most of the time observing her, meditating in her studio. But Kadia, like other contemporary makers, was not using the plant. She had started using synthetic indigo just because it works a bit faster. And I must say, the girl is running a production because the amount of people that were coming in and out was insane. So I realized how even though she was using a synthetic indigo, she was still preserving the culture and feeding a need to the Jola community. So I go back to Dakar and I tell the Black Rock team, I didn't find the plant. So help me find the plant. And then they speak to the people they know, who speak to people, and eventually I end up in Palmering. Palmering is more coastal, and honestly one of the best places I've visited. But anyway, there I meet Mam Mariana, who allows me to take home some of her preserved indigo. So I arrived when the indigo plant was not in season, but luckily she works with the method of preservation, right? So she, during the seasonal time, would form indigo and other local plants and seeds into balls, and she would dry them to use at a later stage. So she allows me to take a few back to Dakar. And I'm just like, I've got liquid gold. So I'm happy to take the dried indigo balls back. But still, I'm looking for this plant. So I come back home, come back to Johannesburg, but luckily, through a friend who I met in Dakar in 2017, I get connected to makers in Dakar, no, in Kano State, in the north of Nigeria, who still make indigo. And the funny thing is that when I was researching about indigo more than a decade ago, Kano State was the first point of reference. But I just didn't know how to get there. So I make it to Kano State, and it is actually a 500-year-old city. And here they've been cultivating and preserving the practice of indigo. I finally get to find the plant. And because now I've found the plant, I feel like, I need to respond in an artistic way. So I use drawing, because drawing becomes a language that I, as an artist, connect to. I use these drawings to mirror the practice of indigo making. I use the drawings to meditate about the space. I use them to think about this knowledge that I've had the privilege to encounter over a decade, right? And although reflecting now and looking at the drawings, I always felt that they needed to stay in Kano State, and they didn't belong anywhere else. So I've been thinking about, how do we actually, as artists, use our practice to actually preserve our indigenous knowledge? But then I come back to South Africa, and I keep looking for that plant here, because we do have our own indigo fera that grows here, but it's mostly used in gardens. No one is really cultivating it for indigo dye. In the past, they used to decorate baskets with it. And that's so far the only evidence I've found of the plant used. So I'm asking you to ask the people you know, so they can ask the people they know. So I can find this plant here and cultivate it, because our indigenous plants and indigenous knowledges are going extinct. So the call to action is, how do you, as a maker, thinker, practitioner, lover of things, use your own practice and skill to preserve our indigenous knowledge? Because this knowledge is not only about culture, right? This is about us shaping who we are. So this is the call to action. I am asking you, what are you obsessed with? Because obsession is a devotion.